Okay, hi everyone. Thank you to the lovely Web Zurich team for inviting me and letting me speak, and thank you to Hasura for snacks and drinks. We can hang out together afterwards and also go downstairs for wine, I think. So before we do that, I want to introduce to you the Hasura GraphQL engine as a new modern way of having a serverless backend. And by the way, I'm Marion. I'm a software developer and community organizer in Zurich. And yes, let's talk later about anything. So the agenda, I only have 15 minutes. It's a very short time to introduce such a big topic, so I will try to be quick. First, I want to talk about GraphQL. Who of you was there last time at Web Zurich? Okay. So maybe some of this will be a little bit of repetition for you. Who knows GraphQL? Okay. Then I want to introduce the Hasura engine, GraphQL engine. We will have a look at the Hasura console, and finally I want to show you how to connect your GraphQL backend to a Vue JS frontend. First, let's talk about GraphQL briefly. So GraphQL is a strongly typed query language. Compared to REST APIs, it has only one endpoint, which makes it much easier for front-end people to access the database. You ask for what you want, and you get exactly that. You don't query a whole object and only need one field. You just get this one field. You can also get a lot of resources in one single request. You can nest them and then get back in one query everything that you want in once. Then, as I said before, it's much easier to separate front-end and back-end. If you have a back-end and a front-end team, the front-end team doesn't always have to go to the back-end team asking if they can implement a new endpoint, because there's just one endpoint. And yes, more and more tech companies are gradually switching from REST APIs to GraphQL, for example, Facebook or Shopify, and also GitHub. To show what I was just talking about, this is from the GraphQL website. First, here with the type, this is how you define your data. And here is a query to tell the database what you want. So you say you want a project with the name GraphQL, and you only want the tagline. And this is exactly what you will get. You will not get the whole project object, but only the tagline, which is what you want. Let's compare quickly the REST API that's more traditional to the GraphQL API. And some of the things I've already said. So the focus of the REST APIs is to have the APIs for as long as possible. So it should be robust and maybe also a little bit more complicated, so it will last for a long time. But this also means a lot of overhead. While with GraphQL, the goal is to focus on performance and flexibility. For REST, you have an endpoint for every resource, and I had to implement an API for a web application recently, and then I had to provide to the front-end people my endpoints, and I was embarrassed when I was like dossier/id/property/id/property unit or something. Then you have to, this is very, you can lose the overview of this, while, as I said, you only have one endpoint in GraphQL. Then for REST, you have the different database methods that I think most of us know, which is get, post, and delete. And in GraphQL, it's always a post request. I said this before, overfetching and underfetching. With REST, you tend to get either too much or not enough information and have to make more queries. Now we will have a look at Hasura. So Hasura is a real-time GraphQL API. Actually, this is what is said here at the end. They started off as an agency, and they had the need for a solution for a GraphQL API and implemented this for themselves to make products for their customers. Then more and more people got interested, and last June they made it open source. Now it's available to everybody. It runs on top of Postgres, so if you deploy a new product, it's automatically a Postgres add-on is added. It runs in a Docker container, and you can run it in authentication. It has JWT tokens, AWS lambdas, or simple access keys as well. And the engine is written in Haskell, which makes it really fast. So this engine is the fastest GraphQL engine on the internet at the moment. So let's have a quick look at actually how easy it is to create a new project. So these are all the cloud services where you can deploy the product, and also maybe important, Hasura is free. You don't, I mean, if you deploy it in any of these cloud services, you pay for them what you need if you want to have it faster, but you don't pay for the Hasura product itself. So when we start with Heroku, I learned these GraphQL things with something called Star Wars API. And I don't like Star Wars, so I made my own Harry Potter API, which is what we will do now. So, and we can deploy. While it's deploying, we can have a look at this template that will be deployed when we hit the deploy button on Heroku. So here you can see it automatically takes the free tier program from Heroku, and it adds this Heroku Postgres in the background. By the way, when you make a query, you make it in GraphQL, and then in the background it gets translated to SQL, then run against the database, which is Postgres, and then translated back to GraphQL. Okay, so now let's hope, yes. So this is the Hasura console. This is the endpoint that we will add later to our Vue JS application, where we can query all our data. Now let's make a table. Let's create a table. We want to have movies. We will take UUID, and there are also some very nice methods that are already implemented. So you can say here, generate so we don't have to make this ourselves, and this is unique. Then we have a move title and maybe a release date. And then we have to select the primary key, which is in our case the ID, and we can add a table. We can now insert rows, like actual data. We can do this here to try it out, but then later we will obviously add the data from our front end. So I will go away from this because I already implemented Harry Potter API. Okay, so when we look at relationships, we have object relationships and error relationships. I think this is more or less clear. So, for example, a movie has several scenes, and the scene belongs to one movie. So when you add a foreign key to, I think in, for example, actors, no. Yes, here is the foreign key, as you can see. And then when you go to relationship and you haven't added the relationships yet, they will be here proposed to you, so you can just add the relationships. It's very simple, and you don't have to have this big database knowledge to actually do it. Then maybe quickly, what else you can do? You can have permissions. So I could have here an admin user that can do everything, and add a user role that can, for example, only select, so look at the data, but not actually change the data. Yes, and here with remote schemas, you could add your own existing database to the project. So if you already have a project and you want to switch to GraphQL, it's very easy to run them at the same time. You don't have to make the migration at once. You can do it gradually. And also you can have event triggers that trigger something depending on what is inserted in the database. Unfortunately, I don't have time for more. Yes, now we will see, I just want to show this very quickly, how to connect our GraphQL backend to our Vue JS frontend. So we have here a Vue application, very simple. We only have a list of movies, like a single movie and the opportunity to add a movie. So for this, we use Apollo client. Who knows Apollo? It's basically a client that helps you make a GraphQL statement against your database from a front end. So we have to import here the Apollo client, HTTP link, because we want to link to our endpoint, and the cache. We will see later what we will use the cache for. Here we make the new HTTP link and add our endpoint that we've seen before. And to the Apollo client, we add the link, make a new cache, and these are just the developer tools for the browser. Yes, so now we want to have a list of movies. We have here a component that is called movie item, and movie item we have here. So one movie has a title, director, composer, and release date, and we will want to display this for each movie. So all this will be displayed here at the movie item. So we iterate over all the movie items and show them on our page. We have to import GraphQL, and then as you can see, it's very easy to write the queries just as you would in GraphQL. We didn't have time to make it in the console, but you can try them out in the console, and you can just, when they work, copy them to your front end. Yes, and here we just say to Apollo, which is the client, that this that we want to execute this query. And now let's see how it looks like. So now these are all the movies that get loaded from the database. Now to add a movie, we have here a simple form, and instead of query, because we don't want to get the data, we want to manipulate the data, we have a mutation. These are all the parameters that we pass, which is title, director, composer, and release date, which are exactly the fields that we have in the form. And then we have to decide what we want to return, which is the ID. And this here is just what happens when you hit the submit button, and it makes sure that the data you pass in the form gets saved actually in the database. So this is the form. And now we can actually add a new, so you see the last movie is this one. So we can send, and now you can see that at the end it's instant, it gets added right away. So this is all I have. Thank you very much, and contact me if you have any questions.